As of the day this video is being recorded, which is September 21st, 2024, I will have been watching wrestling for 10 years. If you're watching this as a non-wrestling fan, you might think there's something wrong with me. To be honest, if you're watching this and you are a wrestling fan, you might think the same thing. But I decided to make this video because I wanted to celebrate / reflect on my 10 years in the business, as it were. My highs, my lows, and what, if anything, being a fan has taught me. I was aware of WWE before I started watching it, of course. I own the WWE Annual 2009, which had still images of WrestleMania 24, and the WWE Superstars show aired on Saturday mornings in Ireland, but I didn't properly get into it until 2014. Now, I might be the only person in the world who can say this honestly, but the thing that hooked me on wrestling was a Brock Lesnar promo. It was a pre-recorded video where he talked about his upcoming rematch with John Cena at Night of Champions, after having demolished him at SummerSlam the month before. Even with my limited knowledge of WWE, I knew that Cena being smashed to pieces was a rare thing, and so I was interested. But then I listened to Brock coldly talk about what was going to happen to Cena at Night of Champions, and he wrapped it all up by saying, "It almost brings a tear to my eye." And I thought, wow. You're about as likely to see a tear from that man's eye as you are to see blood from a stone. Now I was interested. Now I was intrigued. Now I wanted to see what happened next. The match itself was compelling for as long as it lasted, with Brock dominating much of it before Cena came back by repeatedly hammering him with his biggest moves. But then Seth Rollins ran in for the DQ, which could be seen as disappointing, but I immediately got the story they were telling. Okay, I thought. Brock still got the title, and in his absence, Cena has someone new to chase. This guy with the weird blonde streak in his hair, who was clearly presented as the newer version of the Ultimate Opportunist that was Edge. I didn't yet know that Edge had been forced into retirement due to injuries. I had a lot to learn. So, as the weeks went on, I began following the Cena story. I am of the Cena generation, which means that even though I didn't watch him week to week before this, I was of the age that if I had been watching, he would have been my wrestling hero. So I stuck with them, and as I did, I learned more about other characters. I learned about Seth Rollins and what his connection was to this Dean Ambrose guy. I followed it up to that year's Survivor Series, where I saw my first big angle play out in the Team Cena vs Team Authority main event. I saw this amazing performance by the blonde guy with the weird name, Dolph Ziggler. I saw the debut of Sting, who I'd never heard of before, but I instantly knew to be someone of major importance. And I saw the Authority driven from power, which seemed like, at the time, a monumental moment in the timeline of wrestling. And then the Authority simply returned a month later, and wrestling broke my heart for the first time. It was, and remains to this day, a stupid decision. And I thought, oh, maybe WWE don't get it right all the time. I'd find out a lot about that going forward. As the weeks passed, I learned about even more people. Paige was a cool girl in the women's division, going up against the Bella Twins, who were absolute brats before Charlie XCX made it cool. I also found out there was an Irish pair in WWE's training facility, Finn Balor and Becky Lynch, and so I started following their progress. And then came the 2015 Royal Rumble. This event has gone down in history as one of WWE's biggest ever self-inflicted wounds. I had read and learned enough about wrestling history at this stage to know all about Daniel Bryan and what had happened from the Rumble to WrestleMania the previous year. So obviously I understood fan frustration when he was thrown out of the match halfway through. But, and this kind of shows you where I was at the time, I was in favour of Roman Reigns getting that chance. I didn't know yet that WWE had dumbed down his character since The Shield. I didn't realise how bad the Sufferin' Succotash promo actually was. My thought process was, WWE need to throw a fresh guy into the main event mix, and Roman seems as good a choice as anyone. So I was really looking forward to the Reigns-Brock match at WrestleMania, especially after seeing the great battle he had with Bryan at Fastlane, which was available on free TV in Ireland, and so I recorded the show and watched that match over and over again. And then my first WrestleMania. I didn't watch it live, but I obsessively watched grainy versions of the matches that sprung up on YouTube over the following days. Cena winning the US title, Undertaker's return after losing the streak, and a main event that stands the test of time. Even though I wasn't a Rollins fan, and truth be told, he never did become one of my favourites, I really enjoyed the match, from the crash bang wallop of Lesnar Reigns to the drama of the closing stretch when it became a triple threat. This show cemented my fandom, and at the end of the day, isn't that what a good Mania should do? From there, I was off to the races. I watched every Raw and most SmackDowns. I learned everything I could about the history of not just WWE, but WCW too. This included trawling through Wikipedia articles and watching WWE Top 10 YouTube videos, to the point that a year after I started watching, my knowledge of wrestling from WrestleMania 1 onwards was pretty airtight. I was watching videos not just on WWE's YouTube channel, but elsewhere too. My introduction to wrestling coincided with a massive boom in the world of wrestling YouTube channels, with the likes of Wrestling with Regret and What Culture helping to shape my fandom, as well as my understanding of wrestling's past and present. There were other great timings too, such as the rise of women's wrestling and NXT, both of which got a massive push around 2015. I had a gateway to becoming heavily invested in both, thanks to my Irish loyalty to Finn and Becky. There was also John Cena's US Open Challenge, which proved to me at least that the people chanting Cena sucks, who I didn't fully understand yet, were in fact wrong. The first pay-per-view I stayed up to watch was SummerSlam 2015, where I saw the New Day finally click as the most entertaining act on the show. I was dismayed that Cena lost the world title match in such a crummy way, and the main event was mostly entertaining, but left me agog after it was over about why they didn't restart the match after another weird finish. My first WrestleMania that I watched live wasn't a fun experience. I made a video about this event years ago, so my thoughts about the show can be found there. But I have one memory from the time that kind of summed up how I felt. Around this time, I thought the show could only go for 4 hours because I didn't know that the WWE Network meant more flexible runtimes. Because of this, I actually thought that they were going to cancel the main event because they knew it would be bad, and so they would end the show with The Rock standing tall so the fans could go home happy. It was a mental thing to think, I know, but it was nearly 4 a.m. at that stage, and I was very tired, not to mention beaten down by what had been a very poor show. But that main event did take place, and it was as unsatisfying as I expected it to be. Over the next few years, I kept watching WWE and the NXT takeovers, notably watching TakeOver Brooklyn 2 live while I waited for the rematch between Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. I expanded my horizons to understand wrestling beyond WWE, which helped me understand why AJ Styles was such a big deal and why it was so exciting when he walked out at the 2016 Royal Rumble. I started watching New Japan with their explosion in Western popularity. I was as diligent about learning their history as I was WWE's, specifically with the now defunct YouTube channel Showbuckle. Their style of video essay educated me about this new world, but it also inspired me to make a video about the feud between Dakota Kai and Shayna Baszler, which had me watching NXT week to week and found me a new favorite wrestler in Dakota. If you want to see the result of that inspiration, it's on the channel right now. One milestone that sticks out is Backlash 2018, the first pay-per-view I ever switched off before it was over due to a sheer lack of quality. I continued to watch WWE through more bad times that had me questioning if I wanted to keep going, including the infamous Rollins vs Fiends match that I actually made a video review of, and I still managed to be one of the most level-headed people on the internet who reacted to that debacle. As rough as WWE sometimes got at that stage, there was some all-time great wrestling going on elsewhere. NXT takeovers had a period of about 18 months where they just knocked it out of the park every single time. New Japan was still worth the time difference with what they had going on, and following the road to All In and its eventual transformation into All Elite Wrestling was a great ride. So I guess I stuck with WWE because I was all in on wrestling as a whole. Pun not intended. Besides, I had my YouTube channels to follow if I missed something, which now included the likes of Cultaholic and Wrestle Talk. I watched what wrestling became during the pandemic, but it did come with some casualties. New Japan fell by the wayside as their shows became unwatchable with the lack of stars and subdued, lifeless crowds. NXT also lost my interest when it became NXT 2.0, the final straw being when Dakota Kai got fired. I saw what all the fuss was about with this CM Punk guy that people kept chanting for, and while I wasn't on his team, I could understand the appeal. I survived to the end of the Vince McMahon era and looked forward to the hope that wrestling could be a better, more appealing place under Triple H. And 10 years later, I'm still here, with plenty of memories, a fair few scars, and a disbelief in hindsight that I sat through all the things I did without having taken a single break from wrestling in that time. It has been lonely sometimes, as not many people I know are into it, but it's become my thing to enjoy, and I would say it's improved my life. Being a wrestling fan has also taught me a couple of life lessons. First of all, Don't be quick to judge a fandom too harshly. You see, often there are fanatical fans out there for the likes of Star Wars and Star Trek that are typically mocked in general media. Wrestling fans get the same treatment sometimes. I've felt it firsthand. But if someone is passionate about the things they love and it's not causing any harm, that is a great thing. That said, sometimes it can be harmful, which leads me to lesson 2, which I learned best from Sean Ross Sapp at Fightful. Don't fall out with people over wrestling opinions. You don't have to get toxic about things, which seems like a fairly easy lesson, but some corners of Twitter could do with learning that. To wrap things up, I guess I'll end back at the beginning and leave you with some odd observations I had from my early days as a fan, the type only newbies could have. I mentioned the Superstars show that was on a Saturday morning, and from my vague memory of that, I had somehow misremembered the Bella twins as being Asian, like two Gail Kims, so I was very surprised when I saw them again. Speaking of Superstars, I was very invested in the Sin Cara vs Curtis Axel match that happened on the December 1st, 2014 episode of that show. And finally, I never did bother to check out TNA, and I'm not sure if that was a mistake or a masterstroke. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider hitting the like button, sharing the video around, or subscribing to the channel. And if you want to see some of the videos that I mentioned in this piece, they're in the iCard in the top right corner.